Welcome back, everyone. Okay, so those of you who've been with us since the beginning may remember my photos from our family RV trip last year. Well, we did it again. Here we are in beautiful Kings Canyon, California. What about that? Isn't that lovely? Come on.
That's Putin down there. Is that Putin down there?
That's not. There's no. I'm wearing a T-shirt. It's just brown.
Okay, good.
Okay, here's my boys enjoying a waterfall.
Good-looking young
nice.
man.
Exactly.
Yes.
But this is a fun one. The rivers are not just for the kids. Look at this. That is me jumping off a big rock into a river.
Wow.
Yes, there you are. How brave. Here I am at the grill. Very important moment.
Hey.
And of course, no trip to America's amazing national parks would be complete without Pinecone Baseball. There is my son, and there are my pitching, I think you call it in America. Is that right?
Well, as long as you're not playing cricket, that's good.
There you are.
There you go.
All right, that's all for tonight. Thank you so much to Tommy and to Jason. You can learn more about the show by following us at NextRevFNC. Mark Levin is up next. Please do join us again next Sunday when the next revolution will be televised.
Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin. This is Life, Liberty, and Levin, and I'm here with an old friend of mine, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. How are you?
Good to be with you, Mark. I'm fantastic. Thanks for having me.
A lot of people know who you are. You retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel, former member of the House of Representatives. You were born in Atlanta, Georgia, the same neighborhood as Martin Luther King.
Exact same neighborhood, the old Fourth Ward neighborhood.
And you hold a BA from the University of Tennessee, 2 master's degrees, Kansas State University, and also the U.S. Army Command and General Staff Officers College. Now, your father was in the military?
Yes, my father was a corporal during World War II.
Your older brother?
My older brother was a lance corporal in the Marine Corps in Vietnam.
And your nephew?
My nephew just got back from his 3rd deployment in the Middle East, and he is currently stationed at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where 35 years ago I showed up as a brand new 2nd lieutenant.
And you served in Iraq?
Served in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and then in Iraq, and I went to Afghanistan for 2.5 years as a civilian military advisor.
And some time in Kuwait?
Yes.
Kuwait, Iraq, Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Your family is a military family. How did that happen? Why?
Well, you know, I think that when my dad sat down and talked to me early on, I was 15, and he challenged me to be the first officer in our family. And one of the things of that generation that my dad was brought up in, they wanted to prove themselves that they were loyal, patriotic Americans. And when I think about my dad and the sacrifices that he made to go and serve in uniform for a country that did not afford him all the rights and privileges that it did to others. And I will never forget when my dad said that there's no greater honor than to wear the uniform of the United States of America. And that's why I take my oath that I took 31 July 1982 so seriously and to heart still today.
Were you a good kid before you went into the military?
Oh man, I was. My granddad used to nickname me a mule because I was very stubborn, very hard-headed, and I write about it in my book that my parents, from the 1st grade through the 9th grade, I went to private Catholic school, and I told them, hey, look, I really just want to go to the public school down the street, and they didn't want to listen and everything, so I ran away from home.
Really?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, it was my first, well-planned operation. I studied my dad and my mom's sleep habits and everything like that. I figured out the Greyhound bus schedule. Now, like I said, I wrote about it in my book. And I knew that my mom's sister, Aunt Sally, she lived up here in the D.C. area. And I snuck over to the Greyhound bus station in Atlanta and caught a ride up here to Washington, D.C. But I left them a note. They knew everything that was going on. And they allowed me to transfer to a public high school, which, really set me on the course to be where I am today. I joined ROTC. I ended up becoming the Cadet Battalion Commander, which launched me to go into ROTC at the University of Tennessee. But there were those four instructors at Grady High School. It was Lieutenant Colonel Heredia, Lieutenant Colonel Pagonis, Major Heredia, Master Sergeant Buchanan, and Sergeant First Class McMichael. All four of those gentlemen were either Korea or Vietnam veterans. A couple of them were both. And they saw something in me that I did not even know that was in me as well. But it was so important because that structure, that discipline that I had in my home, they made sure that I continued down that path when I was in high school.
A lot of young men who have difficulty as kids and so forth, when they get into the military, it changes them.
Oh, absolutely it does.
It's really an important experience. My father was one of them too. You met my father.
Yes.
World War II veteran. And to make a long story short, eventually you decided to get into politics. When did you decide to get into the politics, and what drove you to do that?
You know, most of the folks in the military, we really don't care for politicians. As a matter of fact, if you're an officer and you got the assignment to be an escort for a member of Congress or whatever, it's probably because you had pissed off your commanding officer. That was not something that we saw as a, grand thing to do. But it was so interesting. I came back after the 2006 midterm elections that the Republicans had lost, and a local woman by the name of Donna Brosmer said she wanted to sit down and talk to me, and she spoke to me about running for office. And, my mindset was on, hey, look, I'm just here for a couple of weeks. I got to go back to Afghanistan. I'm down in Kandahar. I'm working with the Afghan army, Taliban all around us. But she said something that really resonated, Mark. And she said, just because you're out of uniform, just because you've retired from the military, it doesn't mean that your oath of service has ended. And that struck me very hard, because the oath that we take, the oath that my father took, the oath that my older brother took, the oath that my nephew took, was to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and to bear true faith and allegiance to the same. And if you truly believe in that, she was right. And so I embarked on this thing called being a United States congressman, not wanting to seek fame or fortune or a career in politics, but to continue my service to this country.
When did you realize you were a conservative? Were you always a conservative?
Well, this is the thing. And my parents were registered Democrats. I grew up in John Lewis's congressional district, which was very interesting when I presented that to him when I was sworn in with the Congressional Black Caucus. But my parents raised me with conservative principles and values. They believed in faith, they believed in family, they believed in individual responsibility, good quality education, and service to the country. And I think if we start to have conversations in America, not about Republican or Democrat, and I really think the two-party system is falling apart, but if we start to talk to people on their principles and values about what makes this country so great, what enables a kid from the inner city of Atlanta, Georgia, to be sitting here with such an incredible scholar like yourself on Fox News on a Sunday night. That's the American dream, and that's what we fight for, and that's what our founding fathers fought for. It is about an equality of opportunity instead of an equality of outcomes. And that's what makes us conservatives. We believe that this is a great land of opportunity. And we just believe, as Jefferson wrote, about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, not someone else trying to guarantee your happiness. So,
why do you think so few politicians talk about these values, beliefs, principles that attracted you, attracted me, and attract so many people, and may cause a light bulb to go off and say, hey, wait a minute, I agree with that guy rather than that guy?
Because you just said the operative word, you said politician. And politicians are going to say what they think people want to hear. We need to have more statesmen, because a statesman is a person that's going to tell you what you need to hear. And there are a lot of people in Washington, D.C., they're not comfortable with that. They're not comfortable with telling the American people that if we don't do something about the mandatory spending side of our budget, it doesn't matter how much taxes you raise. This is going to overtake our budget, and we're going to be in perpetual debt and deficit. Now, that's not the popular thing to say, that Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security needs to be reformed, needs to be improved, but it's the right thing to say, because a politician is a person that is not able to look at himself in the mirror at the end of the day.
Does the Republican Party need to change? Can it change? Will it change?
I think the Republican Party has to change. The Republican Party should not be the party that is passing $1.3 trillion omnibus spending bills. The Republican Party should not be the party that is not reducing the size and scope of the federal government. The Republican Party should not be the party that, when we look at our personal income tax rates, I mean, the president said initially he wanted to go down to 3. The House of Representatives said 4, the Senate, 7. So we really didn't see any massive movement or massive changes.
On the individual side.
On the
you're right.
individual side. Now, the corporate side, yes. I mean, you've seen an incredible change there, going from 35 to 21%. And we see what has happened with our economic growth, our GDP numbers, and what have you. But the important thing is that the Republican Party should be standing up for individual economic empowerment, because we know what the progressive socialist left believes in. They believe in economic enslavement and the dependency society.
Is the problem the Republican leadership, or the problem that the Republican Party, they've had, by my calculation, really 2 solid conservatives in the last century, Coolidge and Reagan.
Yes,
And we'll see what history writes about Trump. I think he's doing a pretty darn good job.
absolutely.
But they seem to still lurch in the progressive direction because, the progressive movement really started it was really pushed within the Republican Party at the beginning of the last century, Theodore
Absolutely.
Roosevelt.
Theodore Roosevelt.
Yeah. And they seem to lapse into that constantly, don't they?
Yes, they do. And I think the important thing for us to see today in the American political atmosphere is that this is all about the relationship between the individual and government and the system of governance. I think you have 3 different philosophies that are out there. You have progressive socialism, which is what we see, the Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, what have you. But then you can also be a progressive and want to see a bigger impact and reach of government than you want to see with constitutional conservatism, which is what our founding fathers intended us to be. And understand that the most important thing in the United States of America is individual sovereignty. And there are some people in Washington, D.C. that just don't want to cede that back over to the American people because it scares them. That is what the whole Tea Party movement was about. It was not a party movement. It was a philosophical movement that talked about the relationship of the individual to the government. And it was really about fiscal issues. And that's kind of like how this country got started. The tyranny of taxation and some of the other things we saw from the British. So I think that the Republican Party has kind of tried to, walk an incredible balancing act, but they tend to teeter more so to Washington, D.C. and the power that's inside this beltway.
So you run for Congress the first time and you lose.
Yep.
In a very tough district.
Yep.
You won the second time and you win.
Mm-hmm.
You're a Tea Party favorite. Your principles, as you espouse them right now, you espoused them back then. Same beliefs, same values. You run for re-election, and you lose by 2,100 votes or something in what was, in my view, a very suspicious election. You think you might run again?
If I were to tell you that every day I'm not approached about that, and there's something within you, you will always answer the call of service. I moved to Texas 4 years ago, and after this election cycle, Angela and I and the daughters, Aubrey and Austin, we're
Your
going to
beautiful wife, Angela.
Yeah, we're going to, who is much smarter than I am, PhD and everything. We're going to sit down, we're going to evaluate this because I think it's important that we have statesmen. I think it's important that we have folks that understand servant leadership and citizen legislators. That's what we have to restore. And we have to have people with their courage of their convictions.
I happen to know you're a voracious reader. I mean, you and I, when I came to see in Florida a few years back, we're talking about Aristotle and Cicero, and I go, whoa, you read all it? And you said, yeah. You read all my books, not that that's the test, you read a lot. When did that start? Did that start when you were in the military, before you were in the military, recently?
No, that's one of the things the military definitely inculcated into me. We used to have a reading list as new second lieutenants. And one of the books on that reading list was Erwin Rommel's book, Attacks. And that was about the exploits of him as an infantry lieutenant and infantry captain in Romania. And the important thing is that, that was the book that Patton read about Rommel and that enabled him to defeat Rommel.
I read your book.
Yeah, but that was important because after that incredible defeat at Kazarine Pass. So I think that if you're going to, try to present yourself as a leader, one of the important C's of leadership is competence. And you should not be able to stand up there and not back up what you're professing to believe in without being able to say, here is where it relates throughout history. And that, I think, is what the military does train you to do. Because when you're in a battle or whatever, you don't have time to pull out the manual and whatever, but it has to be ingrained within you because folks are looking for that cool, steady hand when bullets are flying.
When we return, I want to ask you about foreign policy. I want to ask you about this recent spat, this election of a Democratic socialist and this push in the Democrat Party and so forth, and get your take on that. Ladies and gentlemen, check out Levin TV almost every weeknight by joining crtv.com. How do you do it? You give us a call at 844-LEVIN-TV, 844-LEVIN-TV. We'd love to have you over there. We'll be right back.